Revenge of the Jedi.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Blue Bounty Hunter channel. Now today in this video I'll be talking about the first scripts as well as ideas that were created for the last film in the original Star Wars trilogy that at the time went under the name of Revenge of the Jedi. In this video I'll be discussing the many different changes and variations of the script over time, and make sure to stick around to the end to hear about how Luke's story was supposed to end in this version. In this video, I'll be getting my information from Wikipedia and the Making of Return of the Jedi book. I will link the article in the description. So for this first part, I'll be reading from the Wikipedia article, and reading from there were actually 3 versions of the script for Revenge or Return of the Jedi that were created. The first was completed on February 20th, 1981, and was said to be titled Star Wars Episode 1, The Beginning, which doesn't make much sense considering it was the end of the trilogy, but I'm also fairly sure that at the time, George planned on making a 3rd trilogy, so it makes sense when you think about it that way. The first draft focused more on Han Solo and Boba Fett, as well as Luke and Leia's struggles to save Han from the bounty hunter, as well as the struggles to save the galaxy from the Empire. The second draft was completed on September 21st, 1981, and featured the death of Han Solo at the beginning of the movie, and was apparently supposed to end with Luke killing Vader in cold blood, becoming a Sith Lord, and then destroying the rebellion, and finally becoming the Emperor of the galaxy. This was obviously the darkest of the 3 scripts. Now lastly, we have the last draft of the film, which was completed on November 1st, 1981, and was the final shooting script that would become the movie we know and love, Episode 6, Return of the Jedi. So as you can see, some scripts focus more on Boba Fett and the rescue of Han Solo, whereas others focus more on Luke and his fall to the dark side. But for this video, we'll be focusing on the first of the 3 scripts because I find it the most interesting, and it's also just kind of like the most out there version of the 3, so I think you guys will probably like that one. So the original script actually started out on Had Abaddon, which was a planet that would later be known as Coruscant, and this planet was the capital of the Empire and had a small green moon that would later be called Just Endor. Also, 2 new Death Stars were under construction, which were orbiting the planet as well. It is noted that in this early script, Had Abaddon was meant to be brown and polluted, which is kind of interesting. I mean, we did pretty much see that in the prequels when we got the later version of this planet. And a fun fact is that Abaddon is similar to the Hebrew word Abaddon, meaning destruction or doom, which makes sense because it was the capital of the Empire. A capital Imperial ship followed by multiple smaller Star Destroyers, were meant to enter the system in this opening scene, carrying aboard a shuttle with Vader and the Imperial officer, Jar Jared, aboard. They were to fly into the planet of Had Abaddon and go down into the lair of the Emperor. In this version, the Emperor's throne room was a large throne surrounded by a pit of lava. Vader goes up, and the Emperor ends up force choking him for being disobedient. He then tells Jar Jared to keep an eye on Vader. So this is very interesting because in this version, the Emperor is honestly portrayed as being even more powerful than in the movies we got, as he is choking Vader here. And also, he obviously doesn't trust Vader, which, as you'll see in a second, makes sense, to be honest. After this, Vader makes contact with Luke in his dreams to warn him of the Emperor's power and to convince him to join him, but Yoda actually intersects the dream and tells Luke not to be worried by Vader's taunts. Then Obi-Wan shows up and tells Luke that the reason he never told him about Vader being his father is because Luke wasn't ready yet. So one thing we're going to be seeing a lot throughout this script is that Obi-Wan as well as Yoda are going to have a lot of interaction with Luke in his dreams and as ghosts and stuff. So that is pretty interesting that we're going to be getting a lot of that in this early version. But then after this, Leia and the Rebellion send a squad to the moon of Hadabadan, and their plan is to set up 2 cannons to destroy the Empire's communications network and blow up the Death Star's shield generator. Also, Luke, Chewie, Lando, and the droids begin a rescue mission to save Han, who is removed from carbonite and set to be executed soon. They go to Jabba's palace, and after Luke kills the Rancor, the group gets captured by Jabba. They defeat his guards and blow up the sail barge, throwing Jabba as well as Bib Fortuna into the Sloth Pit, which would later be known as the Sarlacc Pit. So in this version, Jabba was literally supposed to be eaten by the Sarlacc Pit. A bearded Han Solo then flies them out of the Hutt spaceport using the Millennium Falcon, and they fly to the planet of Sikken. Meanwhile, the rebels set up the cannons on the forest moon of Hadabadan as the Imperials searched for them on quote-unquote rocket bikes and walkers. In a dream, Luke finds out from Yoda and Obi-Wan that Leia is his sister, and that the only way to save her from the Empire is to face Vader. He then constructs his lightsaber, and Han devises a plan to attack the Empire at the forest moon. Leia gets in a chase with stormtroopers on their respective rocket bikes, but she gets knocked off and actually meets some furry natives called Ewoks, and together they defeat some stormtroopers. So back then they were called Ewoks, but would obviously later be called Ewoks. The Ewoks make her a part of their tribe. Luke, Han, and the others go to find her, but get split up, and Han and the droids get caught in a net. Luke, on the other hand, sees Obi-Wan's Force Ghost, who claims he can come back to the material world if he wants, and also claims that from the netherworld of the Force, he can actually limit Vader's power. Luke goes to Vader, and they head off to the Emperor. Jared, the Imperial officer, actually tries to stop Vader from going, but Vader force chokes him to death, and says this line that I think is pretty cool. He actually says that his importance is over-exaggerated. So yeah, that's pretty dope. Leia and the Ewoks overtake the Imperials and use the first cannon to destroy the communications grid. Meanwhile, the Rebel fleet enters the system to attack the multiple Death Stars. Luke and Vader arrive on the surface of Hadabadan, and Obi-Wan shows up in front of them, telling Vader that he will be destroyed by either Luke or the Emperor himself. They arrive in the Emperor's throne room, with Luke meeting the Emperor for the first time. Yoda and Obi-Wan show up, and the Emperor calls them weak. Vader goes to kill Luke because he is commanded by the Emperor, but Luke actually pulls out the Emperor's red Sith lightsaber and fights back. So this is pretty cool that in this version we would have seen a duel between the two of them, where they would have both had red lightsabers, kind of symbolizing the fact that they are both in the dark at this moment. But Luke actually ends up beating Vader and almost kills him, with the Emperor telling him that he is now Vader's replacement. But at the last second, he hesitates and throws his lightsaber to Vader, refusing to kill his father. The Emperor then tells Vader to kill Luke, but after hesitating, he actually starts shooting Force lightning at Luke with his back turned to Vader. And the Emperor is now, quote-unquote, showing Luke the true dark side. But for like the 5th time, Yoda and Obi-Wan actually show up and shield Luke from the Force lightning. Vader then throws himself, and the Emperor and him both end up falling into the lava, killing them both. The Rebel fleet destroys the shield generator and then the 2 Star Destroyers, and they then celebrate with the Ewoks on the forest moon. Luke and Leia talk about how they have destroyed Vader as well as the Emperor, Then Anakin, Obi-Wan, and Yoda show up in the flesh and start talking to Luke. The story ends with Yoda looking over the crowd and sighing in relief. So, some interesting things I just want to talk about that story. It is kind of cool to see that George Lucas really did want Obi-Wan as well as Yoda to be very big parts of this movie, with them showing up multiple times and trying to save Luke as well as turn Vader and all that other good stuff, which I do think in the story it does get a little bit repetitive because the ghosts show up like 6 different times throughout the story, so it just kind of gets tiring after a while, I would say. But yeah, I do like this early version of the script. I think it has certain parts that are definitely more interesting than the final movie, like the lava chamber in Palpatine's chambers, which would obviously end up becoming Mustafar. I also really like the idea of there being 2 different new Death Stars, as well as Had-Abaddon, kind of like this early version of Coruscant that would have been the Empire's capital. I definitely think that would have made an interesting final movie in this original trilogy. But even with all of that said, I do kind of think that the final version that we got was probably better than the early versions of the script, because to be honest, it does kind of finish the story the best out of all the different scripts that came before it. So I do like the version we got. There are definitely a couple things from the early versions that are cool. This was just the first script. I'm sure you can look up, like on Wikipedia or something, about the second script that he actually ended up writing. Like I said, that one was gonna be a lot darker and actually featured Han Solo dying. I believe Boba Fett was supposed to kill him. And then at the end, Luke was actually supposed to kill Vader and destroy the rebellion and then become the Emperor of the galaxy. Now, in my opinion, I think that just doesn't really make sense. Sure, it would have been very cool and it's interesting to think about, but it just doesn't really make sense with the story. You know, it was obviously setting up Luke to become this great Jedi that would end up saving his father and everything. And also, not only does it not make sense for the trilogy, but also just the saga as a whole. I mean, Anakin is supposed to be the chosen one, and he's supposed to kind of come back in Return of the Jedi and save the day, you know, bring balance to the Force. Now, maybe it's possible that in this script, Anakin would have come back and defeated Luke once he became the Emperor as a ghost, and then he could have saved the day and bring balance to the Force in that regard. And as we can see from the script that we talked about in this video, that very well could have been possible, as George Lucas was thinking about giving Force ghosts even more power than we end up seeing in the movies. But overall, there is a lot of different interesting things in these early scripts that I do think were pretty cool to look into, with some of them talking about Luke turning to the dark side, and then some of them focused more on Boba Fett, as well as Han Solo and some of those other characters. But anyways, that's it for this video. You can subscribe if you want to. I upload every Sunday at 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But yeah, see ya.